The radar warning receiver inside the F-15E Strike Eagle suddenly screamed through the cockpit as the jet cleared the 12,000-foot ridgeline of the Zagros Mountains. The pilot pushed the throttles forward, driving the aircraft into full afterburner as both F-100PW-229 engines surged, pouring out nearly 58,000 pounds of thrust. Seconds later, an Iranian surface-to-air missile, a shore-based variant of the Sayyad-2, closed in on the aircraft and exploded dangerously close to the left engine nozzle. Warning lights filled the cockpit as the flight control system began to fail. Eject! 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 The ACES-2 ejection seats fired, launching the pilot and weapons systems officer into the freezing air at almost 600 miles per hour. Below them, the $84 million Strike Eagle lost control, entered a flat spin, and slammed into the rocky slope of Khuzestan, sending a massive burst of burning JP-8 fuel and debris across the mountainside. 90 miles away, two HH-60 Pave Hawk rescue helicopters dropped low over the desert, flying barely 50 feet above the ground. Their rotors kicked up thick clouds of dust as they raced toward the emergency beacon. High above, two A-10 Warthogs circled, waiting for the call to provide cover. The lead Pave Hawk slowed into a hover near the pilot's GPS position. Then, from concealed positions inside limestone caves, Iranian ground forces opened fire with RPG-7s and 23mm anti-aircraft cannons. One round struck the tail boom of the lead helicopter. The pilot fought to keep control as the aircraft yawed hard, spinning nearly 180 degrees, while dark smoke streamed around the engine intakes. From the open doors, the gunners responded with GAU 18/A .50 caliber machine guns, sending tracer fire across the hillside. The lead A-10 rolled into a steep dive. Its GAU-8 Avenger cannon spun up, unleashing a storm of 30mm rounds toward the hostile firing positions. The hillside erupted under the impact, with cave entrances collapsing into clouds of dust, stone, and twisted metal. The second A-10 released 4 GBU 12 Paveway 2 laser-guided bombs. The 500-pound munitions locked onto marked vehicles below, and moments later, the explosions threw the technicals off the ground and scattered the surrounding positions. On the ground, the rescue team reached the pilot and pulled him into the shaking cabin of the damaged Pav Hawk. But the weapons systems officer's signal had gone silent. The helicopters lifted hard, engines straining as the pilots pushed forward for maximum speed. Behind them, the A-10s kept pressure on the hillsides, covering the withdrawal with repeated cannon passes. As the Pave Hawks moved toward the extraction route, more Iranian fighters revealed hidden ZU-23-2 anti-aircraft cannons from under camouflage netting on the reverse slopes. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds tore into the belly of the lead helicopter, damaging the airframe and sending fragments through the cabin. 2 American crew members were wounded, but the aircraft stayed in the air. Iranian state media later captured and broadcast the moment the helicopter was hit, turning the failed rescue attempt into a dramatic symbol of how quickly a single downed aircraft could become a full-scale fight for survival. At the same time, 39-key 338 Igla-S shoulder-fired missiles rose from the high ridgelines. The first one missed its mark, but the second burst near the engine intake of the second HH-60 Pave Hawk, sending fragments into the turbine and forcing the crew to fight for control. The A-10 Warthog covering the rescue team was suddenly caught in heavy fire from several directions. Large-caliber rounds struck the aircraft's reinforced wings and engine housings, but the jet kept moving, its pilot holding the line above the extraction zone. The Iranian ground forces pressed forward with calculated aggression, using the broken terrain of the Zagros Mountains to stay beneath the sightlines of the circling aircraft. Their movements forced the American pilots lower and slower, pushing them deeper into a dangerous envelope of anti-aircraft fire. The Iranian fighters were willing to risk light infantry units for even the smallest chance of bringing down a rescue helicopter. They refused to pull back even as the A-10s began hammering the slopes with repeated 30mm cannon runs. Far away at sea, on the 4-acre flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the electromagnetic aircraft launch system began cycling at high speed. Unlike older steam catapults, emails used a carefully controlled pulse of electricity to launch a 66,000-pound F/A-18E Super Hornet from 0 to 150 miles per hour in less than 300 feet. The tempo was relentless. Every 45 seconds, another jet was thrown into the sky. And before we go further, we want to recognize the men and women currently serving aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Boxer. Many of you watching may have served on these ships or may have family connected to the 494th Fighter Squadron. These machines are powerful, but they are only as strong as the American hands that maintain, launch, guide, and protect them. If you are a veteran, active duty service member, or part of a military family, leave your ship's name or squadron number in the comments. We see you and we stand with you. As the Ford's air wing pushed north, the USS Boxer moved into position in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran answered with one of its most familiar asymmetric tactics, the swarm. 40 fast attack boats, built from fiberglass and armed with 20mm cannons and unguided rockets, surged out from hidden coves around Qeshm Island. They raced toward the USS Boxer at nearly 50 miles per hour, weaving sharply from side to side in an attempt to overwhelm the ship's defensive systems. The Boxer's defensive perimeter came alive. On the flight deck, AV-8B Harrier II jump jets rolled into position and launched in rapid succession. Dropping to just 200 feet above the water, the pilots brought their GAU-12 Equalizer 25mm cannons onto the lead boats, cutting through the front of the formation and breaking the momentum of the attack. On the ship itself, Mark 38 25mm gun systems locked onto the fast-moving targets. The barrels followed the boats as they zigzagged across the water, firing controlled bursts that struck engines, disabled steering, and forced several vessels to fall out of formation. One boat managed to launch a 107mm rocket toward the ship's hull. Within seconds, the USS Boxer's RIM-116 rolling airframe missile system responded. The interceptor leapt from its launcher, spinning rapidly as its seeker locked onto the heat signature, destroying the incoming threat roughly 200 yards from the ship. Iran's refusal to step back now became a broad, chaotic surge of coastal forces. While the USS Boxer battled the swarm boats in the strait, Iranian units activated mobile cruise missile launchers concealed inside limestone sea caves along the coastline. 4 Nor anti-ship missiles launched from the coastline and dropped low over the water, skimming just 15 feet above the surface as they raced toward the USS Boxer at nearly 670 miles per hour. Inside the Boxer's radar room, the atmosphere shifted instantly from routine coordination to full combat focus. Electronic warfare systems came online, working to disrupt the missile's radar guidance and break their lock on the ship. One of the incoming missiles suddenly climbed into a sharp terminal pop-up maneuver, forcing the Boxer to respond at extremely close range. The RIM-116 rolling airframe missile system fired, launching an interceptor in the final moments before impact. Along the shore, Iranian artillery batteries opened a sustained barrage across the shipping lanes. Their 155mm shells splashed into the water, throwing up columns of spray and debris in an attempt to overwhelm the Navy's optical and electronic sensors. Above the Iranian coastline, an EA-18G Growler picked up the signal of an S-300 long-range radar system. The pilot armed the aircraft and released an AGM-88 EAAR-GM. The missile's rocket motor ignited, accelerating it to nearly 1,500 miles per hour as it locked onto the radar source. The Iranian radar crew tried to shut down the transmitter and disappear from the electronic picture, but the missile had already stored the location. Switching to its onboard guidance and active seeker, the AARGM continued toward the site and struck the radar trailer, knocking out one of the enemy's key long-range detection systems. With the coastline's radar coverage disrupted, F-35C Lightning II fighters moved into position. Their internal weapons bays opened, releasing GBU 53/B Stormbreaker precision munitions. The glide weapons spread out on their wings, using advanced seekers to track mobile missile launchers hidden near the tree lines. 3 launchers were hit almost at the same time. Moments later, secondary blasts erupted as stored missiles and fuel ignited, sending burning fragments and rocket motors spinning across the surrounding area. Data from the Navy's E-2D Advanced Hawkeye was passed to Air Force B, 1B Lancer bombers waiting offshore. The bombers opened their internal bays and released 24 AGM-158J ASSM cruise missiles each. The stealthy missiles dropped low over the water, flying at roughly 600 miles per hour as they followed their programmed routes toward hardened coastal targets. In the final seconds, the JASSMs climbed, then dived steeply into reinforced concrete structures. Their heavy penetrator warheads drove deep through layers of earth and concrete before detonating inside the protected sites. Iran then attempted to overwhelm the USS Gerald R. Ford with a wave of 60 Shahd 136 one-way attack drones. Slow-moving and powered by small piston engines, the drones crept forward at around 115 miles per hour. The Ford did not waste long-range missiles on the swarm. Instead, it brought the Phalanx CIWS into action. Guided by its own independent radar, the 20mm Vulcan cannon fired a stream of tungsten rounds at nearly 4,500 rounds per minute. One by one, the drones were torn apart in midair, their fuel tanks flashing briefly before the wreckage fell into the sea. At the same time, the USS Gerald R. Ford's RIM-162 ESSM missiles engaged the higher altitude threats. The interceptors launched from vertical cells in bursts of white smoke, then pulled hard turns toward Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles fired from the shore. The airspace above the carrier became a layered defense zone, with every incoming threat tracked, prioritized, and engaged before it could reach the strike group. Each interception released an enormous burst of kinetic energy, with missiles colliding at combined speeds of more than 4,000 miles per hour. The Iranian Air Force scrambled its remaining F-14 Tomcats and MiG-29s in a last attempt to break the blockade. But Navy F-35C, Lightning IIs, and F/A-18E Super Hornets had already detected them from 150 miles away using advanced AESA radar systems. The Navy pilots fired AIM-12OD AMRAAM missiles, long-range weapons moving at nearly 3,000 miles per hour and guided by their own active radar seekers. The Iranian pilots were operating at a severe disadvantage, their radar systems disrupted by EA-18G Growlers that filled the battlespace with electronic interference. Within the first minute of the air engagement, 4 Iranian aircraft were taken out before their pilots could even identify where the attack was coming from. The AMRAAMs closed the distance fast, striking with enough force to break the aircraft apart in mid-air. One Iranian MiG-29 tried to push in close for a gun attack, but a Navy F/A-18E Super Hornet pilot responded with an AIM-9X Sidewinder and the Joint Helmet-Mounted Cueing System. The pilot only had to turn his head, lock onto the target, and fire. The AIM-9X snapped into a hard turn, its thrust vectoring motor pulling the missile through an extreme arc as it curved toward the MiG-29. Seconds later, the aircraft was knocked out of the fight before it could complete its attack run. At sea, the Iranian Navy attempted to move its larger frigates out of port. The USS Boxer detected the movement and launched 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets armed with AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles. The Harpoons dropped to sea-skimming altitude, flying just 15 feet above the water. At more than 500 miles per hour, they blended into the clutter of the waves, giving the defending crews very little time to react. The first missile struck an Iranian frigate at the waterline. Its warhead detonated deep inside the vessel, triggering a catastrophic internal blast that split the ship's structure and sent it under in minutes. The second Harpoon slammed into the port's fuel pier. The impact set off a chain reaction across the fueling area, disabling nearby patrol boats and destroying the main refueling infrastructure for the local Iranian naval base. As the USS Gerald R. Ford moved into a tighter blockade position under the cover of a sandstorm, Iranian civilian-style vessels quietly released dozens of EM-52 rocket-rising mines into the deep water channels. These mines are designed to wait on the seabed, detect a passing ship, and then fire a rocket-propelled warhead upward toward the hull. The USS Boxer's sonar detected the first launch as a sharp acoustic spike rising fast from below. The mine detonated 50 feet from the ship's port side, sending a shockwave through the water and temporarily knocking out the ship's secondary communications array. Iran used rockets, mines, coastal batteries, aircraft, and naval assets to disrupt the operation while attempting to use the captured weapons systems officer as leverage. U.S. forces responded with precision strikes, clearing missile sites, disabling launch positions, and pushing hostile forces away from the rescue corridor. A final wave of heavy airstrikes hit key missile infrastructure and hardened strategic sites, sharply reducing Iran's ability to continue the fight. With the immediate threats contained, U.S. forces held control of the battlespace and continued the high-stakes rescue mission as the conflict moved toward a decisive turning point.